Tonight on the Worldview Report, we have reports that Joe Biden is trying to seize control of the National Guard and remove the governor's ability to call them out. A leader of Germany's conservative opposition party has been charged criminally and ordered to pay a fine for criticizing the government's open-door policy toward illegal immigrants. Police in Portland, Oregon are investigating a statement posted online in which pro-Hamas activists claim responsibility for torching 17 police vehicles on May 1st. And if you thought the U.S. military was woke before, wait till you see the latest course of study that's been rolled out at West Point Military Academy. All these stories and more as the Worldview Report begins right now.
This is Worldview Report with host Brannon Howse. Whether it is news from the nation's capital or your state capital, from the classroom to the boardroom, from national security to national and local news that impacts you and your family, Worldview Report is your trusted source for vital and uncensored news. And now, here is Brannon Howse.
Good evening and welcome to the Worldview Report. The Independent Sentinel reports that Joe Biden is trying to seize control of the state National Guard units. The administration is centralizing every possible agency and even private companies with executive orders, rules, regulations, memos, and guidance to put all control in the hands of the executive. When a government becomes that large, folks, it cannot be held accountable. Additionally, it transfers loyalty from the states to the federal government. In March, the Defense Department asked Congress to override a law that requires governors to approve changes to National Guard units. The proposal would allow the Defense Department to have unilateral power to transfer units wherever it wants and for any reason that it wants. Given his efforts to use his National Guard to control the border, Governor Abbott would be the administration's number one target, don't you think? There is resistance. Representative Jason Crow, he's a Democrat of Colorado, and he's the founding co-chair of the Space Force Caucus. He wrote a letter representing some House and Senate Republicans and Democrat members. He called the proposal, quote, deeply flawed, end quote. They wrote that it would, quote, undermine the National Guard, end quote. Earlier this week, 48 states, territories, and Commonwealth governors, well, they wrote a letter opposing the proposal to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin. Governor DeSantis, he opposed it in a letter separate from the 48 other governors. Governor Abbott's letter, well, it was more blunt. He wrote that the proposal presents, quote, an intolerable threat to the National Guard, end quote. He noted that it would give the Secretary of the Air Force unilateral authority to transfer the Air National Guard to the Space Force. As Abbott stated, defense secretaries could transfer National Guard units on a whim simply because they didn't want a certain governor to have access to his or her Guard units. Folks, this looks like a power play that even Democrat governors are not going to welcome. And the timing of this power play by the Biden regime should not go unnoticed. 6 months out from a presidential election that observers of all political persuasions are predicting could lead to chaos in America. And it looks like the Biden regime is centralizing their power, perhaps to hold on to power. Former White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki recently fantasized about Trump dying before the 2024 election. Her bizarre public musings, well, they took place during a Tuesday morning appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe. Joe Biden and Democrat media complex, they are terrified of Trump, we know that. And they know Trump is ahead in the polls. They also know Joe Biden is very unpopular with pretty much everyone in the country except people who have lost the ability to think and reason. So I think this is why Biden's DOJ is trying to jail Trump. Biden cannot win unless he cheats, just like last time, or at least he has to jail his main political rival. Psaki fantasized about all the ways that Trump can be eliminated this election season. Quote, maybe Donald Trump will go away. Maybe he'll go to jail. Maybe he will die. Not to be too morbid, but maybe he's not a young man, end quote. That's what Psaki said. Joe Biden is not a young man either. In fact, he's several years older than Trump. But you do not hear these Marxists in the media and their propagandists talking about him dying in office. And I think that's very telling, don't you? Her statement, well, it is more than a little morbid. In fact, I think it borders on incitement. The United States Military Academy at West Point, New York, is implementing a new curriculum that is designed to educate and indoctrinate recruits and trainees with radical progressive philosophies. Among these new courses, well, some of the titles include the following. Quote, Deconstructing Patriotism, Cross-Dressing in the Military, and that's just the beginning. Former Navy SEAL and current Congressman Scott Taylor, who's a Republican from Virginia, well, he was provided a screenshot that lists the new courses, and here's what he wrote on X. Quote, this was sent to me, classes at U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Quite sure China and Russia are not teaching this nonsense to their officers. Fix yourself, end quote. These courses, of course, are seen in the picture included. Deconstructing Patriotism, subtitled Exploring Postmodernism and U.S. Army Recruitment Amidst the Lack of a National Narrative. Uniformed Perspectives, subtitled The Evolution of Cross-Dressing in the Military and Gender Norms. Here's another. Do My Leaders Get Me? Subtitled Unpacking the Importance of Representation in the Military. And another, Harder Rights, subtitled An Approach to Espoused Values and Behavior Inconsistency. The Gateway Pundit noted, quote, the point of contact for these courses is Dr. Morton Inder, professor of sociology and co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Studies minor at West Point. Inder has published on related topics, including a paper that's titled, quote, Dinner and a Conversation, subtitled Transgender Integration at West Point and Beyond, end quote. And this one, quote, Inclusion in the Military, subtitled A Force for Diversity, end quote. And earlier this year, West Point, well, they decided to remove the words duty, honor, and country from their mission statement and motto. Blaze Media reports that an illegal immigrant in Florida is being held without bond after he allegedly grabbed an 11-year-old girl by the hand, dragging her into a van, and then he raped her. Around 9 p.m. last Thursday, 20-year-old Marvin Perez Lopez, a Guatemalan national, was standing near a van that was parked outside his apartment in Lake Worth Beach, Florida. That's just a few miles south of West Palm Beach. He then spotted an 11-year-old girl who lived in the apartment complex. Lopez, well, he allegedly grabbed the girl by the hand and ordered her to, quote, get into the van, end quote. That's what an affidavit claimed. He then allegedly began touching the girl in a way that made her uncomfortable. At one point, she managed to escape, but the suspect grabbed her once again and threw her back inside the vehicle, where he forced himself on her. The girl's mother, well, she'd gone looking for her daughter, and when she spotted the van, she began screaming and banging on the windows. The police, well, they soon arrived, but the perpetrator had fled the area. On Saturday, police found Lopez, and they booked him into the Palm Beach County Jail on charges, including kidnapping to sexually assault a minor, sexual assault of a victim under 12, and resisting an officer. Globalist open border officials in the U.S. and across Europe, they want to downplay and they want to discredit the mounting concerns over the constant influx of illegal aliens from, well, places like Africa, China, and the Middle East. But in Germany, the courts took that effort one step further by charging the leader of the country's conservative AfD party with a crime for her post, advising of the dangers that open borders pose to German women. According to the European conservative, the Verdun Regional Court in Lower Saxony has upheld a verdict against Rothenburg AfD leader Marie Theresa Kassler for incitement to hatred. The 27-year-old Kassler was, well, found guilty in the appeal, and this was a hearing that took place on Monday, and she was found guilty of inciting hatred against Afghan migrant workers. For this, The politician now has to pay a 100-day fine. That's a type of fine related to the daily income of the convicted, plus a fine of 60 euros, a total of 6,000 euros in all. In Germany, you are considered to have a criminal record if you are sentenced to pay more than 90 days of fines. The charges were based on a post that Kaiser had placed on her social media account back in August of 2021. In it, she wrote, quote, Afghanistan refugees, Hamburg SPD mayor for unbureaucratic acceptance, welcoming culture for gang rape, end quote. Among other things, the politician linked to an article showing that Afghans in Germany are particularly heavily involved in gang rapes of German girls and women. Despite linking her post to a story that seemed to back up her claim, she was still convicted and ordered to pay a hefty fine. The Times of Israel reports that police in Portland, Oregon are investigating a statement posted online in which a terrorist group named for slain pro-Palestinian activist Rachel Corrie claims responsibility for torching 17 police vehicles on May 1st. In a post on the Rose City Counter-Info website signed by a group calling itself Rachel Corrie's Ghost Brigade, the group says it broke into a police training facility and set 10 fires in a preemptive May Day attack against the Portland Police Bureau. It says the move was carried out ahead of an eventual operation by Portland police to shut down a pro-Palestinian protest at Portland State University's Millar Library. Police say in an email that they are, quote, aware of the online post claiming responsibility and that is part of the investigation, end quote. OrganianLive.com reports protesters had occupied the library for 3 days before the university asked police to intervene. 4 students were among the 12 people arrested on Friday, and that's again according to the website. We'll be right back after this break.
A lot of people are having great success with a weight management program with Bellatrim, but it's just a tool. In terms of ingredients, Chromex or chromium picolinate improves the actions of insulin, so you have better glucose management, and in addition, it promotes fat utilization. Fat utilization or fat burning is also a feature of metabolite, which are 2 botanicals that stimulate a switch called AMP kinase, and so you tend to burn fat, reduce belly fat or visceral fat. Who doesn't want that? Metabolite has the ability to stimulate satiety or reduce those cravings. That's really very, very important. And it does that by raising GLP-1 levels. In addition, we've addressed the microbiome by using prebiotics. Healthier microbiome, better weight management.
Welcome back from the break, and thank you for joining us tonight and every night, and thank you for helping make the broadcast possible. You are really our biggest sponsor. You can sponsor us many ways, but one is by supporting WVW Foundation.com. Our foundation exists for many reasons, but primarily to produce programming, news, information, TV shows, radio shows, documentaries, literature, websites, to help push out information for free, to help people understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview. And if you appreciate that fact in this public service and ministry broadcast, we appreciate your support at WVWFoundation.com. You'll also find our mailing address there if you prefer to support us through the mail. Don't forget that our foundation also sponsors our Sunday night church service. That's at 8 p.m. Central Times on Sunday nights at worldviewtube.com. Right now I'm teaching through the book of Revelation. Just finished up lesson 6. We'll take off for Mother's Day, but we'll be back, Lord willing, the next Sunday as we again begin with lesson 7 and continue teaching through Revelation chapter 2. So again, you'll find all of those archived right now for you to watch on demand free of charge at worldviewtube.com. So again, thank you for supporting our foundation. that sponsors so many of these free programs, including this one right here, WVW Foundation.com. Military.com reports that live weapon training for the Army Special Forces units and most of the elements that support them will be shut down for much of this week due to a safety breakdown that resulted in a soldier being accidentally shot. That was during a training event. That's what the service confirmed to Military.com. A 7th Infantry Division soldier at Joint Base Lewis McChord in Washington State was accidentally shot on April 25th by another soldier with an M249 squad automatic weapon, or an SAW, light machine gun. That's according to one source with direct knowledge of the situation. The injured soldier was in stable condition and recovering at, an Army medical center. Starting Tuesday, all Special Forces, Civil Affairs, and Psychological Operation units will have a 3-day safety stand-down. The pause includes all scheduled live weapons training being canceled, again, according to Major Russell Gordon, a spokesperson for the 1st Special Forces Command. It was unclear which unit the shooter is assigned to. The base is home to the 1st Special Forces Group. The incident occurred during force-on-force training when live ammunition was accidentally mixed in with blanks. Whew. But blank ammo, it is commonly used in training and acts in all the same ways as live ammunition does, of course, with real weapons. But there is one exception, and this is the big one. There is no projectile. The Army typically, of course, takes great care to keep blank and live ammunition separate. And contaminating one set of the ammunition with the other is considered, among the most damning safety mishaps that one could possibly make. Quote, "It is prudent of us to take immediate actions now to do an internal assessment as part of a safety stand-down," end quote. So said Gordon in a statement to Military.com. It is unclear how live ammunition made its way into blank fire training, but service officials are still investigating the incident. The two types of ammunition are visually very distinct, so it's unclear whether the SAW was loaded with a belt of live ammunition. That weapon, which uses 5.56 millimeter rounds, can also be fired using a rifle magazine in which a small number of live rounds, could have been more easily mixed in, though that would still be a very egregious error. The Special Forces safety stand-down follows an unrelated stand-down in February when the Army National Guard grounded its helicopters after back-to-back AH-64 Apache crashes. 2 Mississippi Guardsmen sadly died in one incident, and 2 Utah Guardsmen were injured in the other crash. Former President Donald J. Trump, the frontrunner in the 2024 presidential race against President Biden, said he's open to using the United States military to deport millions of illegal immigrants if he is indeed elected president. During an interview with Time, Trump was asked if he would use the military to deport illegal immigrants, and he responded, quote, "When we talk military, generally speaking, I talk National Guard. I've used the National Guard in Minneapolis. And if I didn't use it, I don't think you'd have Minneapolis standing right now because it was really bad. But I think in terms of the National Guard. But if I thought things were getting out of control, I would have no problem using the military per se. We have to have safety in our country. We have to have law and order in our country. And whichever gets us there, but I think the National Guard will do the job," end quote. Trump said, quote, "We have no choice," end quote, "but to deport millions of illegal immigrants that have entered the United States through Biden's open border." Quote, "I don't believe this is sustainable for a country. What's happening to us with probably 15 million and maybe as many as 20 million by the time Biden's out," end quote. Trump said, quote, 20 million people, many of them from jails, many of them from prisons, many of them from mental institutions. I mean, you see what's going on in Venezuela and other countries. They're becoming a lot safer," end quote. Time magazine challenged Donald Trump's plan to use the military for his deportation operation, arguing that the Posse Comitatus Act bars the U.S. military against civilians. Here's what Trump said, quote, well, these aren't civilians. These are people that aren't legally in our country. This is an invasion of our country, an invasion like probably no country has ever seen before. They're coming in by the millions. I believe we have 15 million now, and I think you'll have 20 million by the time this ends, and that's bigger than almost every state, end quote. And then he added, quote, I can see myself using the National Guard, and if necessary, I'd have to go a step further. We have to do whatever we have to do to stop the problem we have. Again, we have a major force that's forming in our country. When you see that over the last 3 weeks, 29,000 people came in from China, and they're all fighting age, and they're mostly males. Yeah, you have to do what you have to do to stop crime and to stop what's taking place at the border, end quote. In a dramatic twist in one of the most high-profile criminal cases in recent history, Trending Politics reports that Judge Aileen Cannon of the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida ordered the indefinite suspension of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation into former President Donald Trump. The ruling effectively halts further pretrial proceedings while the court sorts through a labyrinth of discovery matters, disclosure issues, and other complex legal motions. In her meticulously detailed 5-page order, Judge Cannon cited the interconnected nature of numerous pretrial motions, discovery disputes, and Classified Information Procedures Act. That's the CIPA. These are considerations as compelling reasons to vacate the scheduled May 20th, 2024 trial date. Instead, the judge alluded to the need for additional time to ensure a fair and comprehensive legal process. This is what the judge wrote, quote, the court also determines that finalization of a trial date at this juncture before resolution of the myriad and interconnected pretrial and CIPA issues remaining and forthcoming would be imprudent and inconsistent with the court's duty to fully and fairly consider the various pending pretrial motions before the court, critical CIPA issues, and additional pretrial and trial preparations necessary to present this case to a jury, end quote. And then the judge added, quote, the court therefore vacates the current May 20th, 2024 trial date to be reset by separate order following resolution of the matters before the court, consistent with defendants' right to due process and the public's interest in the fair and efficient administration of justice, end quote. Zero Hedge reports that people who took COVID-19 jabs were found to have later suffered from psychosis, with Pfizer and AstraZeneca shots linked to most of the cases. The peer-reviewed study was published in the Frontiers in Psychiatry journal on April 12. It examined a cross of new onset psychosis among people who took the vaccines, so-called vaccines. Psychosis, of course, refers to symptoms that occur when an individual has difficulty differentiating between reality and fantasy, with hallucinations and delusions being two key types. The review looked at 21 articles describing 24 cases of psychosis symptoms following vaccination. The researchers concluded that, quote, data suggest a potential link between young age mRNA and viral vector vaccines with new onset psychosis within 7 days post-vaccination, end quote. Then they went on to say, quote, collecting data on vaccine-related psychiatric effects is crucial for prevention, and an algorithm for monitoring and treating mental health reactions post-vaccination is necessary for comprehensive management, end quote. In 33.3% of the cases, administration of the Pfizer mRNA vaccine, quote, potentially induced adverse psychiatric events, end quote. That's what the study said. The viral vector AstraZeneca vaccine was linked to psychotic symptoms in 25% of cases. Now listen to this. In 45.8% of the incidences, psychotic symptoms were reported after the first shot, and in 50% after the second dose. Quote, almost all reviewed cases, 95.8%, presented with psychotic symptoms, such as hallucinations and delusions, end quote. The most common form of hallucination was auditory. That was in 54.2% of the cases, while visual hallucinations were experienced by 12.5% of patients. The psychotic symptoms mostly lasted for a period of 1 and 2 months. Wow, can you even imagine? Well, now it's time for our nightly Worldview Report commentary. Last week, federal officials announced recalls of ground beef and organic walnuts because they were potentially contaminated with E. coli bacteria that can make people sick. The recalls involved more than 16,000 pounds of ground beef distributed by Cargill Meat Solutions and sold at Walmart stores in 11 different states, as well as organic shelled walnuts that are sold in bulk in natural food and co-op stores in 19 states. So far, the recalled walnuts have been associated with 12 illnesses, including 7 hospitalizations in Washington state and California. No illnesses have been reported from the ground beef recall so far, although ground beef remains one of the most common sources of illnesses from these types of bacteria, which are responsible for an estimated 265,000 illnesses annually, according to the CDC. Now listen, folks, something about this doesn't pass the smell test, does it? No illness has been reported, according to all the studies we've read. But somehow, they've selected 16,000 pounds of ground beef as potentially hazardous to your health. Now, this could just be an overreaction, or, well, it's a scare tactic. What do you think? And by the way, it just happens to come at a time when beef prices are already rising, and of course, the globalists are trying to remove as much of the beef and meat from grocery store shelves as possible, preferring instead that we obviously eat fake meat. So, something's going on here. I think they're gearing up to produce massive amounts of insect-based protein and lab-grown cultured meat. They say it's necessary in order to save the planet. But trust me, you will not see the elite, the power elite, eating bugs or fake meat grown from animal cancer cells. No, this will just be for us little people. Now, I don't know about you, but I would advise staying away from what big agriculture, big government, big brother says is good for us, whether it's their, well, latest mRNA injection or an unhealthy version of protein. Stay away from whatever they recommend. Well, that does it for this edition of the Worldview Report. As always, thank you for watching and for supporting the broadcast. And remember, one way you can support us and help your family is by going to twc.health/Brannon. Now, this is the emergency medical kit, but guess what they now have? They have another kit, looks just like this, but a different color. It's a contagion kit, and it's specifically for things like the bird flu. And have you noticed they're ramping up all the fear over that? Well, don't panic, says Dr. Thorpe on my broadcast last night. Don't panic, just be prepared. And you can go to twc.health/Brannon, use that URL, and you'll get a savings, and you'll support this broadcast. twc.health/Brannon, go to the top of the page where it talks about all their different kits. Hover your cursor over it, and there'll be a pull-down menu there. Click Contagion Kit. That's the kit you want to get and have on hand with them ramping up for this bird flu pandemic. Okay? So not only do you need the emergency medical kit that has, things like amoxicillin and whatnot, you also should get on hand the contagion kit. I have one on its way to me, and I'll be bringing it here to the desk to show you. So again, please consider checking that out. Then, of course, don't forget Bella Grace. I take it every day. It's an elixir, a powerful elixir with 3 powerful ingredients, high-quality, top-drawer collagen that actually gets into your system. That's versus 95% of it that gets flushed. It's got astaxanthin, which is it's an ingredient loaded with antioxidants. And then it also has cat's claw, which is an anti-inflammatory. Full details, including the 80 clinical trials, are at melissahousebg.com, melissahousebg.com, then Numi.com/house1. This is loaded with glutathione. Glutathione is awesome molecule, a powerful molecule that detoxifies. You mean with viruses and all this stuff, you might want to actually detox with spike proteins? Go and do your homework on the powerful molecule glutathione that is in Numi. Swish with this, like I did last night before going to bed. Swish with this for 3 to 4 minutes. Gets into your system, then you can swallow it or spit it out, and within 90 seconds, it's in your system. Again, do your own homework on the power of glutathione for detoxing your cells, a powerful molecule that's in your body and that your body needs in order to live. And it starts to break down at about age 20. So again, Numi.com/house1 if you want our organization to get credit. So a great way, I think, to support your health and us at the same time. Numi, NEUMI.com/HOWSE and the number 1. Thanks so much for your support. Till next time, I'm Brannon Howse. May God save America. Take care.